Hey guys, Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com, back again for another session of High Power University, and specifically we're going to get down into some technical aspects of the design work that is factors in the fast safety, or the SFS, safety fast shooting system, from BHSpringSolutions.com. This system was originally designed inside FN. It was patented 2 times, second time after some revisions, and LVII was part of that from the design work, and LVII's company manufactured this product for about 28 years. It's now a BH Solutions product, and these exact parts, these kits of parts, were installed by FN as factory parts, as OEM parts in 5,000 high-power pistols at FN in 2003 and 2004. By the way, Browning Arms Company in the United States, their service department was responsible for servicing any of those 5,000. They've reported to me they never saw any. That this system, it just doesn't get needy. From that standpoint, it's a very John Browning-esque kind of a system. Most people know that the SFS, or Safety Fast Shooting System, or Fast Safety, whichever name you prefer, it was primarily designed as a solution for carry, for like condition 1 carry, when you carry with a round in the chamber. Most of the time we've carried cocked and locked. In other words, the hammer cocked, the safety on. It makes a protruding hammer. It makes it a little difficult to carry. A lot of holsters allow that hammer to dig into my side fat. Very uncomfortable. And, you know, some people just plain don't like cocked hammers. It's difficult when this hammer, any hammer, is cocked, to clear clothing. This is very anti-snag. It clears clothing with absolutely no problem. That hammer in this position won't grab clothing. You carry in this position. When you pull the safety off, the hammer cocks. We could call this the safety first system, because there's actually 4 safeties in place. When that hammer goes forward, and this is how you put SFS on safe, push the hammer forward, the safeties cam up all by themselves. When the safety cams up, the slide is locked, the trigger is locked, the hammer is locked, and also in place is a drop safety. And the drop safety, this drop safety is specifically for the occasion of a hammer drop, and it's located right there. And it's movable inside there. It moves kind of with the hammer, and it is sitting right here at the bottom of the firing pin retaining plate, and it cannot be fired until that drop safety is moved. It moves when you pull the trigger and the hammer is released from the sear. At that point, it will rotate downward and allow the hammer to go home to the firing pin. One of the, we would call, design deficiencies of the original high power pistol is you have no safety in the event of a drop of the butt on the gun, and if that jarring causes this hammer to go home to the firing pin, it's going to fire in that position, and unfortunately that's more or less coming right back towards probably the person who dropped it. So a design deficiency in the original high power design, no hammer drop safety present. The SFS system adds that hammer drop safety, and in fact you can carry with some confidence in condition 1, because in this condition right now we have not 1 but 4 safeties engaged. So that's why I say we could call this the safety first system. It's as easy as de-safety, pull the trigger, and you're in business. And when you're ready to put the weapon back on safe, the hammer goes forward like that. You can no longer lock the slide back in order to disassemble, so the extended slide stop that comes with the system allows you to disassemble with the slide forward. Fastest, easiest takedown of a handgun possibly that's ever been devised. And it works very smoothly, in and out, just like that. Some of the other features that this system brings forward for the high power pistol, I'm going to talk about one of those, an anti-backlash feature. And this is where this somewhat gets kind of technical. And the question, first of all, is, okay, well, what is backlash? I mean, I think we all can kind of get an idea of exactly what it is, but it's not what you think it is. In 1959, inventor designer by the name of Gary Wilhelm received a patent in 1960 for a trigger anti-backlash device for firearms. Now, this would be not an easy modification to make into a high-power pistol, quite honestly. That's what his anti-backlash design kind of looked like. But he defined backlash, and I'm going to just read it right from his patent application because I thought it did a very good job. Trigger backlash, so-called, is caused by an excessive amount of movement or travel of the trigger beyond the point in the overall travel of the trigger where the firing member, such as the hammer or cocking device, is released in order to fire the cartridge. During this movement, there is so little resistance to the finger pull on the trigger as compared to that before the firing member is released, that it is as if the trigger were suddenly relieved of any resistance at all. Triggers with a large amount of such over travel, so to speak, and resulting backlash are undesirable because the trigger finger picks up a great deal of momentum if it is permitted to move even a small distance after the firing member is released. Backlash therefore makes the gun move off the target just at the instant that it is fired. It is accordingly desirable to reduce the amount of backlash in the trigger as much as possible without interfering with proper release of the firing member. That's a good definition, and if that was too much all at one time, it was a little bit much for me the first time through, and I read it through a couple more times. So if that's the case, back the video up and follow along with that. I'm going to demonstrate and I'm going to show to you an example of what he's talking about there. Then I'm going to show you why it exists in the high power pistol in its traditional design, traditional operating system, and why it's important. And getting an idea about this is rather subtle. This is an old high power. We do have the BH advanced trigger subassembly, but it doesn't matter. That's not what anti-backlash is about. What I'm going to show you is I have nice little bit of take up, and it's very modest. But when I pull the trigger, I have a lot of travel at that point, and I wind up with a longer reset than I had take up. That travel, now I've not done this. I've not pulled the trigger and now racked the slide, in which the case the trigger lever clears the sear lever, and I may have more movement rearward. That's over travel. That's not what we're talking about. This is pure backlash. Backlash happens, and the reason why I have the presence and the element of backlash here, where I would not have in this SFS equipped high power, that's the trigger travel that we have. But when we pull the trigger, you notice there is just no movement at all. That's none. There's a reason for that. I'm going to show you that reason right now. The original high power design by Takedown Save has no anti-backlash element to the design work. And we're going to show you what SFS changed. If we can see here in the video, what I want you to watch is this end of the sear lever. When I depress it here, I want you to see the range that sear has. And you're seeing it right there, hopefully. So lots of movement, lots of range. With an SFS sear, I'm going to take a look here. That's it. And the sear can only move that much. That means the trigger can only, or the sear lever that's in the slide can only press down that much. That means the trigger can only move that much. And that's the reason why when you saw the trigger break happen on the SFS version, the one here in my hand, that trigger there was no motion. When the break happened, the break happened and there was no additional travel of any kind whatsoever. The reason is this anti-backlash feature. The safety mechanism of the SFS system is made with this anti-backlash feature, and I'm going to show you just how that limitation on the sear travel happens with the SFS equipped high power. The sear sits in the frame like that. The safety installs from the other side like this, and when it installs, you have this post right here. And that post is actually doing about the same thing that Gary Wilhelm's invention in 1959 did, but it's all integral to the system. That post sits behind the sear, and it allows the sear to be pressed down enough so it clears the hammer tooth, but it can't just keep going as in the case of the original design where, my goodness, I mean, that goes a long, long, long way. It doesn't allow it to do that. It limits the movement of the sear real nicely, and that is anti-backlash, and that is another feature that's added with the SFS system when you install it that is not present with the traditional operating system. This lack of an anti-backlash feature, it makes the refinement of the trigger pull much more difficult, because you don't have anything behind that sear limiting all that movement. So naturally, you can press down with the trigger, clear the hammer like that, but you can go a lot farther. So in other words, I've cleared the hammer right there, but look at all of that excess movement. All that excess movement, more than it takes for me to clear the hammer tooth, that is the source and the origination of backlash, and that is solved with the BHSpringSolutions SFS system. Now we're going to go ahead and show you one more thing about the SFS system. And that is, we're going to kind of explain what's happening here and where when we're doing this, because a lot of guys think that, oh wow, God, that hammer is so light, and boy, can I trust that to hit the firing pin hard enough, fast enough? I mean, is that possible that that's going to make the weapon fire? You have to understand the construction and the design technology of the fast safety or SFS system in order to get a understanding of that. Now, if I stored my high power just like this, the SFS system is not going to work. The hammer is up against the firing pin. The mainspring is not charged, and in fact, the mainspring, which is on the hammer strut, and we'll show you that here, that spring is here. When I cock the hammer, or quote, rack the slide like that, what I have done is I have compressed this spring. When the trigger is pulled, it will be this spring that drives the hammer home into the firing pin. However, once I have charged this spring, once I have cocked the hammer, at this point, unless the sear clears the hammer tooth, which means I had to pull the trigger, unless that happens, what's controlling this movement is a spring that is inside the hammer assembly. This is not just a hammer, it's a hammer assembly. Contained in there, there's the little drop safety that gets in front of your firing pin that creates the hammer drop safety. It's contained in the hammer assembly. And then we have the return spring, and it looks like that. Once we have charged the hammer spring, or the mainspring here in the grip frame, now the hammer is being controlled by this little spring inside the hammer assembly. However, if I pull the trigger, that gives authority to the hammer back to the mainspring, the one that is on the hammer strut here. And that's what drives it home to the firing pin. That mainspring on the hammer strut as well is the resistance to the slide that the slide meets when it has to cock that hammer in the process of recoil, in the process of the slide sliding rearward that now cocks the hammer. Now back in this position, control of the hammer goes back to the spring inside the hammer assembly. Pull the trigger, authority of the positioning of the hammer went to the hammer spring. It causes resistance on the slide. It's part of your recoil control, but once it's compressed, once it's cocked, now this happens because of the spring inside the hammer assembly. So I think a lot of people don't quite understand how the SFS system or fast safety system works. Certainly we've not covered all of the functionality and all the benefits that the SFS system brings to the high power pistol, but what we've tried to do is try to highlight some of the more technical aspects and understandings of how this system is working for guys, so they realize what a stroke of genius this system really was. It actually added back into the P35, the high power pistol, multiple design elements that John Browning had designed into the predecessor pistol, the 1927 Grand Regiment, his last patented design. The SFS system actually adds back many functionality and design aspects that were present in the 1927 Grand Regiment. This helped to put many of those back into the high-power pistol. Folks, thanks for watching. I'm Mark Allen, BH Spring Solutions, LLC, and BHSpringSolutions.com.